On this week's episode, as their movie continues onward, what is the best from Pixar? Our thoughts on Hunters and Altered Carbon, and you thought you spent a lot on a PlayStation. All this and more as we once again delve into the pop culture cosmos. And we're back with another episode of the Pop Culture Cosmos. This is Gerald Glassford from Pop Culture Cosmos, Inside Sports Fantasy Football, the Lakers Fast Break Podcast, and Game Source. Thank you so much for listening to all of our great programs. It wouldn't be a Pop Culture Cosmos without my good friend. Well, I was going to call him our own Pizza Planet delivery boy, but I might as well just say it's Josh, whose iMac crashed. From popculturecosmos.wordpress.com. You can also check out all the great things that he's doing on his podcast, Topicocalypse. And of course, his great book, which you can buy on Amazon or at Barnes & Noble today, Congratulations, You Suck. It is my good friend. It is Josh Peterson. Well, I'd say what's up, man, normally, but it's what's going down that crashed.
Yeah, the iMac went down. I don't like podcasting when I'm on speakers that aren't like good, so you have to pardon the ringing in my voice. But yeah, I was sitting there. I have two computers hooked up, right? So my second one went to plug my mouse and keyboard back into it, and it just froze. And I tried to turn it off and on, would not work. It's still loading. It's been stuck at like 98% for the past hour. So whoever says Apple makes the best computers has obviously never had this happen before.
There's a Microsoft joke in there somewhere. I just won't say where. But we are going to have a great show for everyone out there today. We're going to be talking a lot about what's going on with Onward, because that is now out in theaters. We'll tell you how it did this weekend at the box office. Plus, we wanted to go ahead, because Pixar brought its latest movie out, wanted to touch on some of our favorite movies from the whole library of Pixar movies. And because Pixar has been such a great part of Hollywood over the past 30 years, we just wanted to go ahead and share our thoughts on the best of Pixar, in our opinion, coming up here on the show. And speaking of our opinions, we're going to be sharing a lot of that on this week's show, because we're going to be talking Amazon's Hunters, which just ended its season. In fact, well, all the episodes came out at once, but I got a chance to check out in full, so I'll share thoughts on that. Plus, Josh is going to share his thoughts on Altered Carbon, which I've seen some of as well. So we'll talk about Altered Carbon from Netflix and also Amazon Hunters coming up here in a bit. We're also going to be talking about some video games, because Nintendo PlayStation, that's right, Nintendo PlayStation, it went up for auction. It was basically a prototype that was meant to be, but that wasn't meant to be because of a lot of certain things that went on behind the scenes between Sega, Nintendo, and Sony. A lot of stuff that's going on. If you read, there's a lot of stuff going on as far as an auction concerned when it comes to the Nintendo PlayStation. And it's not, I'm not making a mistake, it's not an oxymoron. It was the Nintendo PlayStation. It is a prototype that went up for auction. We'll tell you how much it sold for coming up later in the program, but also as well, not only touch on that and how valuable some of these video games and video game consoles can really get. We'll talk about some retro games from our past that we'd like to have back. Some of them are pretty valuable, and we'll talk about that later on in the show as well. Plus also, I think that's pretty much it. Anything else, Josh?
Just real quick, I watched Dragon Quest on Netflix, the movie based on Dragon Quest V. Pretty good flick. I thought it has its cheesy moments, but it's pretty good. So you get a chance, you're a fan of that game and the genre, check it out.
Well, and also as well, Castlevania is also something that is coming around, I think, for the third season, if I'm not mistaken. That is something that Netflix is also bringing out as well. It's gotten very high marks from a lot of reviewers out there, including a 10 from IGN. So if anyone out there gets a chance to go ahead and check it out, that is Castlevania on Netflix. So it is definitely something that you might want to go out your way to see. So video game series is something we're also going to be talking about here later on in the episode about video game series that are really influential. So again, we'll be talking a little bit more about that in the later in the show as well. But Josh, it was Onward this weekend at the box office, and we wanted to actually see how this movie fared out worldwide, and kind of use this as the litmus test for what's going on with all the, the fear and all the things that are going on with the coronavirus, and how a lot of people are concerned about going out in public and to things like, for instance, going out to the movie theaters and going out and checking out your local movie at the Cineplex. That has been something a lot of people have been very wary of. We've all heard the reports of, several different countries around the world that are suspending and closing, theaters, or, theaters in their countries. And obviously because of the scare and obviously the health risks that have come from the aspect of the coronavirus that's out there. We talked about China, we talked about Italy, South Korea, and many other markets suspending, basically for all intents and purposes, suspending their movie operations for people going ahead to the movies. So we wanted to understand better what was it like and what would be the fiscal impact. We know that analysts have said it could be as much as $2 billion loss in China and up to $5 billion. I think it might even be more when all is said and done, that will affect adversely the box office for the movie industry. So it's definitely something to be very seriously concerned. But Onward, Disney and Pixar's Onward, I don't want to say it disappointed. I don't want to say it was, might have done better had it been a different environment right about now, but it did only deliver about $40 million in domestically in the United States. Something that for a Pixar movie is kind of underwhelming. But remember, this is a new IP, and not all their new IPs hit on all marks. Usually that's the traditional, Cars, Toy Stories, and Incredibles that usually have hit very high marks. But even their own original IPs have sometimes worked very well, like Inside Out, and even to a lesser extent, Coco. But sometimes they don't always work out, like The Good Dinosaur. And this movie came out to a so-so opening, even in the face of the coronavirus that came out. But it only did about $28 million extra worldwide from another 47 territories, according to Box Office Mojo. So that to me is a little bit disappointing, because when all is said and done, Onward is probably not going to be one of the best grossing films of the Pixar library. I wanted to ask you, my friend, how much do you think is been, this was the first real litmus test for the movie industry on how much the coronavirus could possibly affect a movie such as this. I think it did have a hand in it, although I don't think it's 100% the fault of coronavirus for the results of this movie. I just don't think this movie was as heavily promoted and backed up by Disney as much as it should have been.
No, I mean, down here, I'm not really seeing like a decrease of people going out doing things because of the coronavirus. I'm seeing a lot of people in stores buying toilet paper and water bottles and prepping for a snowstorm. But, it's not so much I'm not seeing a lot of activity that's being dwindled, if that makes sense. So with Onward, it's interesting. Yes, I have not seen a lot of trailers for it. It looks really good, and I have seen trailers pop up, but I'm not seeing any like billboards. You're not seeing any bus signs. You're not seeing any posters at bus stops. You're really just not seeing anything. And even going into Disney, going into downtown Disney, you don't see anything there. You don't see any merch. It's a lot of Frozen 2 just came out, so you're going into stores and seeing that everywhere. But yeah, I think there's a definite issue with marketing, but also it's kind of a weird concept, right? Because these kids are trying to bring their dad back to life, and they bring back all that's there is his legs. So I mean, I'm wondering if parents are having an issue with both the magic aspects and like the deeper questions of the soul and things like that. So I think it could be a mixture of things instead of many different things, or it could be a mixture of things instead of just one specific. But it's hard to tell, man. Like, I do want to see this movie though, because I have heard really great things.
It's been pretty solid as far as from a Metacritic standpoint. And you're right, it's something that I would like to see, but I wasn't really super excited to see it. It's the Pixar brand, so it's going to be, it's going to have some type of quality, but it's not one of the Pixar movies that I think Disney was really getting behind. And that's what I'm trying to say is I think Disney, even with what was going on with the scare of the coronavirus and all that, I don't think that Disney pushed this film as much as they could or should have in order for it to get to a point where it could have been a really big hit film. And this film, whether or not it makes money long term, that's going to be really, really dependent on the issues going forward and the concern going forward about people going to the movies and all that. Because like we've talked about, you said in your areas in Southern California, there hasn't been much of the way of concern. People are still going out and doing things. But in other parts of the world, there is people, there are markets, like I said, that have been totally shut down as far as from a box office standpoint. So I think at this point in time, Onward is probably going to be the first of maybe many movies that could be hampered, at least in the short term, by what we're seeing from the coronavirus. I know there's a possibility that once the marketplaces open up in Italy, Japan, South Korea, China, and other places, once those markets open up and you have Onward playing in those theaters, that it can recoup some of the money that it made. But this is a rare miss. It's not a unknown miss, but it is a rare miss from Pixar, I think, as far as from the overall aspect. And it's kind of tough because you had Chris Pratt and Tom Holland, two major stars that have done well because of their affiliation with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and also in Chris Pratt's case from the Jurassic World series. They just didn't get it done this time around. Like I said, I think the fact that Disney just didn't promote it as a special enough movie, in my opinion, to me says that they didn't have enough confidence in this movie at this point in time.
Yeah, I wonder if this was one of those things where like Disney would say, hey, if you make us a Toy Story 4, we'll put out this movie for you. It's like if you do something for us, we'll do something for you. Kind of like how Vin Diesel keeps doing these Fast and Furious films because Universal has promised to fund like a final Riddick film for him. So it's
or maybe even a Bloodshot that's coming out this next week.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm wondering if there is like some kind of agreement that took place there. It's the same thing with Andrew Stanton, right? He said that he would do Finding Nemo 2 if he could do a John Carter film, and that didn't really turn out. That was another one that Disney didn't really market very well. So it's there's a ton of possibilities there.
I know we always go back to John Carter at every point in time.
I know.
Talk about that as a missed opportunity. As someone who has seen the film, not as much as you have, and you've read the book and whatnot, I'm just going to say this. I enjoyed the film, John Carter, but I know there were parts of it that made it too long, that made it kind of unappealing to a mass marketed audience. And people calling it a big bomb and whatnot. It wasn't a huge bomb, and it generated, I think, over $300 million in the box office, just off the top of my head. So it wasn't a huge bomb per se, but it wasn't the cataclysmic box office hit that I think Disney was hoping that it would be, because I just think it had a story, or the way it was portrayed on film has something that it really could not have translated well to a larger scope of audience.
Well, they took they took 3 books and tried to shove them into one, which was not like the best. It didn't provide good pacing for the movie, but it didn't really seem like it had a lot of faith from Disney to begin with. I watched like this making of video, and it had like Jon Favreau and a lot of Disney's like high profile filmmakers who were inspired by the Edgar Rice Burroughs novels, but it didn't really sound like Disney backed them as well as they should have. So you didn't really get that love, that Disney love that most films would get. And it sounds like that's kind of what's going on with Onward.
I agree with you on that. And my daughter said the same thing as far as what you're saying in regards to John Carter about the Percy Jackson series. Because we talked about the other day about she's a big fan of the books, from the Percy Jackson books. And we're talking about the sequel that she saw, which the movie sequel, which she saw the other day. and she clearly said the same thing about how they were trying to fit so many of the story, or so much of more than just one book, into of the framework of a movie. And when you try to do that, you're going to get most likely a mess of a movie, and that or disjointed film, I should say. And with John Carter and with the second Percy Jackson movie, you definitely saw the points where they were good, and then there were a lot, that was in there that could have been not so good, because of the fact that simply because you're just trying to cram in so much from so many different sources. So Onward, it just didn't. It's not going to go down as one of Pixar's highest grossing movies, I don't think. I think it's pretty safe to say at this point in time, which is kind of disappointing. But they've got another movie coming out later this year that they can go ahead and make up for that. Hopefully the climate and marketplace will be better for them, because they are an outstanding company that has made so many tremendous films over the course of the years, and are so relied upon by Disney for being a backbone for their movie industry. Because you've seen, we talked about the declining returns of Star Wars, and we've talked about how Marvel needed to take a break, so you needed something to fill the gap for Disney. Onward was really not going to be able to fill that gap for them with any kind of success. And that's kind of disappointing, but I think there's going to be more from Disney coming down the road that might make up for a little bit of that. But I know the coronavirus for the whole entire movie industry is going to be something that they're going to be feeling for quite some time. Not only Disney, but everybody else. What are your thoughts out there on Onward? Did you get a chance to see it this weekend? What were your thoughts on it? And if you wanted to and didn't because you were fearful because of what's going on with the coronavirus, we want to hear if that's impacting your decisions on going out to public places, events, or even the movies. We want to hear your thoughts on that. PopCultureCosmos@yahoo.com. Also as well, Pop Culture Cosmos, Humanica Media, and Game Source on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as well. Well, we talked about the financial impact of what's going on as far as the movies are concerned, but that led to me for this just real quick, Josh. I know it's a little bit off topic what we're talking about, but again, it goes on the coronavirus. You and I talked about it a little bit before we went on air, and that was we're seeing a lot of things impacted out there in our society, not only from a general financial standpoint, but things close to home in pop culture. South by Southwest, after several exhibitors and major outlets decided to not go ahead and attend due to fears of the coronavirus, they canceled. South by Southwest canceled its event. We've heard many other cons being adversely affected and canceled because of it. We're seeing many other events being limited to in some form or fashion also as well. So I want to ask you, my friend, is this a fearful time to be out and about because of public? Because it seems like it's, the fear for a lot of people is there, but also the realities of what's going on it's giving even more important each and every day as we're hearing more and more people getting adversely affected by what's going on.
Okay, sorry, my mouse was like panicking. All right, anyways, besides the point. All right, so I have some thoughts.
And I don't want to go too much into it, but just I just wanted to hear your thoughts, because we talk about this off camera all the time.
Yeah, so there's a definite difference between what doctors are saying and what the media is saying, right? So the media is creating hysteria. Meanwhile, doctors are saying, it's just, you can leave your house, just go out, be careful, like make sure you're washing your hands, make sure you're taking all the necessary precautions. Well, the coronavirus is a big deal. It's not like an apocalypse virus like the media is making it out to be. And because more people are so focused on what the media is saying, the panic and hysteria are a lot bigger, right? You go into grocery stores, people are buying up toilet paper, they're buying up soap, they're buying up perishables, they're buying up water bottles. It's like it's I don't know. It seems like there's more hysteria than there is coronavirus. So I don't know where you stand on that, but like I don't know. It kind of rubs me the wrong way, right? Like the way it's with toilet paper, right? Water bottles or whatever, but with like toilet paper, right? You are stocking up on something that people could actually need, and in that panic, you're creating unsanitary living conditions for other people. So it's that part about it bothers me. I get people not wanting to get sick. I get not wanting to spread the virus, but um, the health professionals are saying it's not really what the media is making it out to be. So maybe there's a panic, but also like I understand people wanting to stay healthy. So there's two sides to the coin. It's not going to stop me from leaving the house, but it is what it is, and people are going to do what they're going to do.
This is true, my friend, but we're going to continue to report on what's going on with the pop culture world about it around us. So there's a lot of the things we can talk about, but yes, it is something that's out there. It is the coronavirus. Whether or not you were, saying what Josh is saying or saying adversely, it is something that I think everybody needs to think about to some extent. Please be respectful of others and continue to try to do so as we go ahead and continue our lives, hopefully on a daily basis, as we continue everything we can in our regular lives.
Wash your hands, cough into your sleeves, be courteous about your health, be courteous about other people's health, and like if you have the make sure if you are one of those people who are buying up large quantities of things, make sure you buy just what you need and not over purchase, because there are people who do need things. There are people who actually like are, with the paper towels and toilet paper, there are people who will actually need that stuff. So, make sure you're just buying what you need.
There you go. Well, let's move back on to good pop culture subjects right here, my friend. And that is this. We talked about, like I said, the what's going on with Onward and all those things with Pixar. But we didn't talk about the library itself, and this is something that we really haven't gone into much when it concerns the Pixar library. It's something that often gets overlooked when it concerns Disney and those great things that they have in Star Wars and Marvel and all the Disney movies that they're doing that are the real life animations, the real lives from the classic movies that they're doing, the remakes from the classic movies that they're doing. And I wanted to ask you this. I want to hear your thoughts on exactly your favorite. Let's just pick a top 5 Pixar movies, because there's a lot of movies in the Pixar library that you could say are really, really good and are really, really entertaining. But there's got to be like a top 5 you can really go ahead and point to and say, hey, those are the top 5 Pixar films I like to see.
So that's tough for me, because I'm a huge fan of their short films. Like I think they're super clever, and
they're often I have a friend that works at Pixar that often works on their smaller projects such as that, and they're often, like you said, some of the best stuff that they actually put out.
Kind of refresh my mind on all the different Pixar films here. I feel like I forgot a few. All right, so like I'd have to say that like my favorite is Brave. Really like that movie. If I were to go in order, it'd probably be Brave, Incredibles, A Bug's Life. I wasn't a huge fan of Dinosaur. Loved the first Toy Story, and then Monsters Inc. and Up are probably, or not Up, but Coco are probably my top 5 films.
Well, you mentioned about 6 there, so if you had to put it to 5, let's go on. So Brave is your number 1. Why is Brave so touching to you?
I don't know. It's just like they don't make movies about that culture a lot. We have Braveheart, but other than that, we don't have a lot of films about Highland culture. And there's something like it felt, the mythology there, and it felt very rich, and the music was really good. And I don't know, like I'm glad that Merida is considered a Disney princess.
And then you talked about that as your number 1 movie. What is your number 2?
Number 2, all right, I'm gonna move it up the list. Coco. I watched that movie back when it first came out, and that third act, man, had me bawling like a baby.
That's not something unlike most of the other, or a great deal of the Pixar movies that are out there that have a tendency to really at the end get your emotions on high gear.
Yeah, it does. And much like Brave, like it's very rich and it's like its ethnicity, right? And it's culture and like the music and the mythology that exists there. Like it's very well researched, it's very well done. You know, there it seems like it's not, you know how Disney kind of like puts films on an assembly line, but you know that when you're getting something from Pixar, because it takes so long to craft, that there's a lot of care put into it. And Coco is one of those films that like I will remember for the rest of my life.
Well, you talked about Coco and you talked about Brave. What is number 3 on your list?
Number 3 is Incredibles, the first one. So like I really enjoyed that movie, and that was like the last movie as a kid I went to go see with my parents, and like they really enjoyed it too. I don't know. There's just something about like those back when I was getting into us. There's something in their off time, right? What do they do when they're home? What's that life like? So it was really cool to kind of see that come to life. But I know you're a big fan of The Incredibles. I was not huge into the second one, but the first one is definitely a classic with me.
Okay, well, I might disagree with you on that end part of it, but moving on to your list, what is number 4 on your list of the best Pixar movies, in your opinion?
Up is number 4 for me.
Okay, why do you like Ed Asner being a grouch for the entire movie?
Well, it's one of those movies where like it feels like a story your grandparents would tell you. And as someone who like really enjoyed story time with my grandparents, like it was I I fell in love with that movie, you know, and like I can't watch it over and over again just because it is so heartbreaking to see. It's just it's great. It really stands out to me, and like it just takes me back, reminds me of being a kid, and you know, that was a journey that I was more than happy to go on, and came out of the movie feeling very satisfied with it.
So I've heard your first 4, my friend, but there's got to be one more. What is number 5 on your list of the top 5 Pixar movies that you have in mind?
Bugs Life. You know, I remember seeing that movie when I was a kid and like having all the toys and having everything that went with it. And, you know, I was really excited about that because I remember it came out around the same time as Ants. And I remember like watching A Bug's Life and then watching Ants, like wondering why that movie existed. But Bugs Life it was a Bug's Life, man. I loved it. I love Francis, what's the ladybug, and all the, like the jokes that they threw into there. Like, it was a very well done movie, and like that was the first Pixar film that I'd seen after Toy Story, so it kind of really stuck out to me.
And that's the thing with Pixar, is because they have so many great movies now that have been out, and such a vast library. Like you said, like we've talked about over the years, now over 20 movies strong, plus all the shorts that they've also produced at the same time as well. That it makes it hard to have such a confined list because there's so many other great features that they've had over the years that you could easily put in that top 5. I mean, for every you didn't even mention Wall-E. You didn't mention some of the others that have been out there. The Cars movies. I know a lot of people don't care for the Cars movies, and I think they, especially after the first one, kind of went downhill for a lot of people. It's just mainly for kids and things of that nature. I know that gets said a lot. It's mainly kids fare for those for at least two, the second and third. So that's why this usually doesn't fare up on those lists. But you've got Wall-E. You've got so many other different movies within the Pixar mix that have proven to be very good. I'm going to list out 5 right myself. My top 5, going from back to front. Number 5, Inside Out. And just a very, very solid movie, but it really starts to get at your heartstrings right there. It tugs at your heartstrings. You will not leave this movie, or, you know, not back then when it's in the movie theater, but you will not leave the living room couch when you watch this on Disney Plus without sobbing like a baby. And I think that's probably, of all the movies on Pixar, because most of them have a tear-jerking moment, I think this may be the tear-jerkiest of the tear-jerkers that Pixar have provided out there. So It's my opinion. Oh, go ahead.
Well, it's funny that you one because that's kind of like the most controversial Pixar film out there, right? Because a lot of parents took up issue with the fact that they were talking about mental health in a kids movie and they're tackling some really dark subjects. And there's parts in that movie that get incredibly dark. So it's just interesting that that was one of your top ones because I've never heard anybody say that before. I enjoyed it, but
I think because it goes there. I think because it's
okay.
a little bit daring in that sense that's why it ranks up higher on my list. Wall-E, there were actually about 3 or 4 that I could have put in that number 5 slot, but I think Inside Out makes it simply because of the fact that they did things in that movie even more to an extent than they have ever done before. I think the closest that could come to that maybe as far as that emotional type darkness would be Coco. But even then, it doesn't go as far or high up as Inside Out to me. I think as far as going and reaching out to that dark of a level, I think I'll give you a hint. Coco's coming up here in a second, but that's for not just that reason, but even more. And I'll talk about that instead. Number 4 is Toy Story 3, which I think is the best of the Toy Story movies. Toy Story 3 and Toy Story 2 are right there for me. And that was also Toy Story 2 could have been in my top 5 easily. But Toy Story 3, I think of the Toy Story films, is just a little bit above the rest. And I think it's because that last act was something that I was ready to go ahead and say, you know what? This has been a great trilogy of films in Toy Story history, in movie history. I'm really happy with the way this series concluded. I really was fine with the Toy Story series ending, and that's because Toy Story 3, with its ups and downs, was really a good film, and I was just so happy to have experienced it all from Toy Story 1 to 3. Toy Story 4 isn't a bad film. It wasn't really necessary. I just, okay, they're back, the guys are back, the gang is back. It was a solid movie for what it was, but it really didn't inspire me to, in the way that Toy Story 3 did, because I was ready to say, say goodbye to the series at Toy Story 3 because it was so well done. And the conclusion of it was really a nice way to go out on a high note. And I think they were ready to conclude the Toy Story series. And I just think Disney brought, or like we talked about with Disney before, maybe Disney influenced them with the cashola to bring back Toy Story one more time to a newer generation and maybe a younger generation so that they can, obviously, like you've talked about before, selling the toys and la 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 and all that. That's probably the reasoning by bringing Toy Story back. But Toy Story 3 ended the Toy Story series at that point in time on a fabulous note. Number 3 is Coco. It doesn't get as dark as Inside Out, but it has a lot of those elements. What it does do a little bit better than Inside Out is tell an overall overarching story. I think a little bit better than Inside Out. And I think it really, at the same time as pulling your emotions, it also creates a little bit better narrative at the same time. And I just truly enjoyed it. Plus also the fact that you get something that, like we've talked about with Brave, like you talked about with Brave, putting something like that, that culture being in the spotlight in that type of movie, in that type of film, presented in the fashion that it did, was really, I think, a very great positive. And I think it's one of the best examples that I could probably say, you know what, if you want to learn more about a certain culture, go check out Coco. You talked about going to check out Brave in that sense. So I definitely think Coco is well worth your time. And I think it's a fabulous film. And it's number 3 on my list. Number 2 is Incredibles 2. So I'm sorry, Mr. 2. Number 2 is Incredibles 2. And for a time when the first one came, for a time when this one came out, I thought it was number 1 on my list. But I went back and I saw both of them again. I wanted to, not be in the heat of the moment and said, because I think on this show I said at that point in time it was ahead of Incredibles. But now that it's been about 2 years since Incredibles 2 came out, and I got a chance to look at it again and reevaluate both of them, I think by the slightest of margins, Incredibles 2 is number 2 to me. I just think Incredibles 2 told a great narrative into today's environment. I think it's a very empowering film. I think it sends a great message, but it's not, in your face with it. I think it just does a great example as far as from not only a hero but a villain standpoint. There were characters that weren't as well used in Incredibles, like Frozone, for instance, that were even better implemented into Incredibles 2. So I truly appreciated everything that Incredibles 2 did, and it was just an outstanding film. But just maybe check with me 5 years down the line. I might feel differently, but Incredibles 2 at this point in time, I think sits me just behind the number one movie. But go ahead.
Do you think that they're going to finalize it with a trilogy?
Well, you see what their history has told them. Toy Stories, they went 4. They were probably planning to do only 3, but they went 4. Cars, they did 3. They have the Monsters Inc. series. They've only done 2. The Nemo series. They've only done 2. I have a feeling they're going to do 3 Incredibles. I think you can still get one more good movie out of it. I think that if you try to go ahead with what they did with Toy Story and go to Toy Story 4, you're going to get something that, it's good, but it's not really having that magic. I think you can keep the same magic if you went to an Incredibles 3, because for me, the number one movie is The Incredibles. When I watch it, and I've seen it many times now, I think it just has that staying power, and I think that's probably why I made it number one. It's because it's a movie you can watch today and have the same feelings as if if you're watching it for the first time that someone back 15 years ago when the movie came out had when they watched that film. It's just something that it doesn't feel dated. It doesn't look dated. It just looks like it's a really, really good film. And you go in there and you watch it and you see the strong narrative about family and the importance of family within the confines of that movie. And it really makes it for just an inspiring film. And just it's well done throughout beginning and it's clean, it's cut very well, and I just am very impressed by it. So I cannot say enough great things about Incredibles. But then again, check with me 5 years from now, I might say Incredibles 2 might be number one, but you never know. You never know. They're both great films, and I think there could be enough magic left in an Incredibles 3. So what are your thoughts out there on your top 5 picks for the Pixar movie for Pixar? We'd love to hear your top 5 Pixar movies. We'd love to hear your top 5 Pixar movies out there. Please let us know. popculturecosmos@yahoo.com. Well, we're on the back half of the show, my friend. Cannot thank you enough for sticking around. It's so great to have you here. We're going to be talking a lot more great stuff when it concerns pop culture. Want to thank our good friends at Salt Radio because we're returning to Salt Radio. Great to be back on their station. Plus also as well, we've got a new station we want to thank being part of amongst our many stations around the world that we're on, and that is Smooth Living FM. So hopefully you'll go ahead and chance to listen to all the great stuff going on at Smooth Living FM. Cannot thank them enough for being a part of their station, and we do want to thank all their listeners for listening, as we do everyone that listens to us either on all the radio stations that we're on 7 days a week or on any of your podcast outlets. My friend, a lot of great things still to talk about on today's show. Know you got a chance to check out Altered Carbon. You've been really wanting to talk about it in depth. Did get a chance to check out more of the series. So before I go into Hunters, aka another performance for Al Pacino, I want to hear your thoughts on Altered Carbon.
Okay, so beyond what I said last week about Anthony Mackie like doing a great job playing like the brooding character, he played
Takeshi. He played Takeshi.
Yeah, Takeshi Kovacs. He played him really well. Okay, so beyond that, and I love the fact that the story takes place 200 to 300 years after the original one. Love how they brought back Poe. Loved how they kind of like talked about AI rampancy, kind of like they do in Halo, and Poe's losing his mind a little bit. But I also loved how they address that humans face the same problem, right? If you get brought back too many times, you spend too much time in a stack, you do start to kind of lose your mind. Your sanity chips away. So I like how they address that, and I'm wondering if that will, play a big part in what's to come. Should they make another season? So on the complaint side of it, I did not like how, I didn't dislike it, but like the world in this one felt significantly smaller. I don't know if you noticed that, but
Well,
like,
that's the thing. On last week, I thought it was a little bit more broad. I mean, I understand the beginnings of last season, and I just thought it was explained in a little bit better detail in this season. But then I could be wrong.
yeah, but I mean, and I get it. It's from the whole point. Like they were doing a lot of world building last time, so you got to kind of like see just how depraved mankind had become, and they're exploring all the different aspects of that. But we'd already seen that, right? It's already established. So this one really only takes place on that one world, and there's a lot of drama between some of these characters. The other one is a lot of investigating, right, by Takeshi Kovacs, and he was he was you were seeing more characters in that one, whereas this one felt a little more isolated, more less characters, but more more development with the characters that you do get on screen. So there's a trade off there. I did enjoy the let's see, what was the girl's name with the stacks? I forget what her name was, but I did enjoy kind of seeing that dynamic there. She was very interesting. Her dad being the gun dealer, and then she had they were holding her family hostage in the end of it. So that was really cool. And I loved seeing the elders, right? The alien creatures who lived in they were born from the trees, where the Kel Falconer figured out that she used that to try to create stacks and how to move the human conscience from one place to another. Like that was really cool. My big question here is: do you think did you finish the series?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so my big question here, and I'm going to spoil some things, is this: do you think that it was kind of a cop out to kill Takeshi and then bring him, and then kind of say, oh, his thing was being stored in Poe? Do you think that was kind of a cop out? And
well, no, because they're obviously going. If the season does well enough and that Netflix brings it back, they're just going to bring him under a different character.
Yeah, well, I mean, right, but
or a different actor, I should say, a different actor.
I agree, but don't you think at the same time this could have been a good opportunity for them to kind of hand the show over to like one of the two female characters who are kind of interesting in their own rights?
I would agree with you on that. That would have been, when it concerns, Dig 301 or Trep, it would have been something that I think a lot of people would have been interested in seeing, being transferred over. And it's not out of the realm of possibility we could see, whoever Takeshi, whoever takes up the role of Takeshi next season could be a woman. And I would not put out of the realm of possibility, that being the case. I agree with you. That would have been a good swerve, is to move it into what, Trep or Dig 301, maybe one of those two becoming that, instead of bringing someone from the outside in. But I have a feeling because they want a big name, that's exactly the reason why they're doing it. So because Anthony Mackie is now becoming a big name in the industry, because he's doing, not only is he doing a lot of projects, but he's doing some projects of his many projects that are working with an audience, not besides just the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So they're going to bring in someone with a name, it looks like to me, and I just don't think they have enough confidence in Simone Missick or Dina Shahabi as the main star individual to lead next season. They don't think that's going to draw in enough viewers. I'm just thinking from a Netflix point of view.
Right. Well,
I think from a performance standpoint, and I told you, season 1 for me was a hard watch. Season 2 was a much easier watch for me, and I enjoyed season 2 a little bit more than I enjoyed season 1. I could see season 3 if somebody told me, hey, we're going to go ahead and make Dig 301 the Takeshi Kovacs or the star of the show next season, I would have been all in, or Trep. I just don't think that they're going to go ahead and do that. I think they're just going to go ahead and bring someone else in, male or female, because the Takeshi role is perfect for that they can bring a star in, a new star in each and every year. So I think that at this point in time, you're going to see that as a continuous pattern for each and every season, as long as Altered Carbon keeps getting renewed.
Yeah, and I don't see like the part of Takeshi being played by a girl. Like they have strong female characters on there, so it doesn't really seem like there's any point in that. I mean, it felt like a weird step to me, but at the same time, like I would love to see their characters develop a little more outside of him, and it would have been cool to see like maybe don't tell us Takeshi's still alive. Maybe save that for a season, maybe 3 episodes into the next season. Like that would be cool too. Like maybe give those characters a chance to live and thrive, because I actually really enjoyed their arcs.
Well, it looks like something that if you get a chance, please check it out. It's Altered Carbon Season 2. For me, it's a better watch than Season 1. And it looks like Josh has enjoyed it throughout. So if you get a chance, check out Altered Carbon on Netflix. Before we head to the break, I wanted to go ahead and talk to you a little bit about Amazon's Hunters, now available on Amazon Prime. So if you catch it, it's really something that I think you would be interested in. Obviously there's talk of the Nazi hunters and all that. Al Pacino's fronting the series. You and I spoke of when we saw it about the similarities when the first trailers came out and when we saw them, about the similarities to what we were seeing or what we had already seen from The Boys and how great that series is with us. I'm going to tell you, my friend, it does have a lot from The Boys. It does take a lot from it. It does take a lot from The Boys. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it does have many similarities as far as the twists and the turns. Obviously, they don't have Nazis in The Boys. The thing is here is the idea and the concept of Nazis in America, and they go ahead and hunt them down and things of that nature, and the cultural differences, and obviously the historical flashbacks to the horrible things that were done during the World War II period, and the people of the Jewish faith, and how they were terrorized by the Nazis, and the entire thing. You see a lot of the concentration camps and all that. I do want to say that you see many of the horrors that were committed and the atrocities that were committed, and not only then, but also that were done or in the series as well later on by these hunters. Then the way they pay back as far as when they find the Nazis and their retaliation, and the Nazis that are living amongst Americans because of what happened with Operation Paperclip and all that. You see all that going on, and it tells a nice narrative, but the similarities in the type of the way they structured the story, you would see and say to yourself, I saw something similar in The Boys, or there'd be a twist. And you're like, I saw something like that in The Boys. So I can't say that they're drawing from something that didn't work, because they did. The Boys worked, and at the end was, for us, the best show on either streaming or any type of television last year. It was our number 1 show. So I just will say this. It's a good show. It's a good series. Al Pacino is, you're getting Al Pacino pretty much throughout. Everyone else involved does a very solid job nobody just does any, nobody goes out of the way to be having a poor performance during the whole series. I think it's really solidly acted, and I think that's probably its best part of it, is the way it's structured as far as the cast is concerned, and the antagonists and the protagonists going off against each other, and the obvious hatred between the two sides. The twists and the turns and the story arcs that go on are very similar in structure to what we saw very recently from The Boys, and I think that keeps it from being a great series, but a very solid series that, I will be going into, because like The Boys, at the very end, it does have some things in there, and I'm not going to put out spoilers like we did a little bit with Altered Carbon, but it does have some twists and turns, especially in the final couple episodes, which necessitate you watching for next season, but also reminds you very much of what something similar we saw in The Boys.
Do you feel satisfied with, like, I know is Logan Lerman, I think, the main character in that?
Yes, from Percy Jackson, which we talked about earlier in the show.
Do you feel satisfied with like where he ended up when the show was over? And are there like personalities that clash within the Hunters tribe or whatever they call themselves?
Oh yeah, there were always small clashes here or there, whether it was on the Nazi side or whether it was on the Hunter side, and that ultimately, the things that came out of it led to some twists and turns within both those outfits. I really think at this point in time, some of it worked for the best, and some of it was working against it, and it didn't help the series overall. But some of it did work out, like I was saying. I just think at this point in time, Logan Lerman was a clear standout as far as what was really good about the series. I think he was very good in his role. I was surprised. I was surprised that could go ahead and be in this type of role, because of the only thing I really saw him in previously, or that I remember seeing him in, was obviously the Percy Jackson movies. And he did okay in the Percy Jackson movies. I wasn't really that impressed or not impressed. But I was impressed with the way he handled himself against some really, good actors, and especially Al Pacino, and how well he held and acquitted himself against that type of top-notch talent. So I was impressed, and I'm hoping to see more good things in the long run from Hunters. Again, it's a good series. It didn't hit me with that, this is really some great stuff, but it is a good enough series to go ahead and say, you know what, I recommend it. Stick through it all the way. Stick through the highs and lows. Stick through the twists and turns. And there are lots of twists and turns in the final episodes, especially that final episode. There's some big twists there. So you got to go ahead and check it out. It is Amazon's Hunters. I do recommend it, and I will be catching season 2 when it comes out next year.
It's on my queue. I want to. There's a few shows I'm trying to get through, but like, you've spoken highly about it, and the trailers looked interesting enough. So it is something I do plan on sitting down and watching. But with Castlevania, there's a lot of shows coming out, man. It's gonna be a busy year for streamers.
And before we head on out to the break, I just wanted to say Castlevania, again, a very highly rated show, a very highly rated series. Again, is it season 2 or season 3 on Netflix?
It's season 3, so each season has gotten more episodes. So I'm wondering if that's why it's taken so much longer to pump them out, right? So you had season 1 had 4, season 2 had 8, this season has 10.
I think that's probably why, because just the sheer time it takes for the animation. But it's definitely paying off, because there's a lot of outlets that are heaping a lot of it. There's a lot of outlets that are heaping advanced praise to the Castlevania series. Again, like I said, IGN has given it a 10. So that's a really good sign for it, amongst other outlets that are really enjoying the Castlevania series. So give it a chance when it comes out on Netflix. And you mentioned one more earlier in the show as far as video game series is concerned.
What was it? Dragon Quest. Yeah, it's just a movie. It's a movie based on Dragon Quest V. It's got a cool little twist, good little message in it. It's family friendly. You can watch with your kids. Don't have to really worry about anything. And it's worth watching. Like, I had been hesitant for so long. I had that in my queue, and Ni no Kuni, both based on video games. And I was pleasantly surprised by how good this movie was. It's called Dragon Quest: Your Story.
And it just leads into what we were talking about in the past couple weeks about all these different projects cycling back to video games, where video games was once a taboo subject, and there were outlets or the movie industry really didn't want to touch it. When they did, it would lead to a bad version of it, whether it's on TV or from a movie standpoint. I mean, for every one good Halo series, there'd be like 2 or 3 others that were utter trash, or something else that was like a Final Fantasy, Spirits Within. I don't know how you feel about that one, but I'm not in love with that movie. You're pointing thumbs down, so that tells me what you think. The video game industry as a whole has not been very well represented in a movie or television medium. So it's good to see that some signs are on the way. Sonic the Hedgehog, pleasant surprise. Critically, it may not be all that beloved, but you know what? Commercially, it's been very successful. We just talked about Castlevania, Dragon Quest. We see some great things on the way for that. The Last of Us, we talked about on our last episode about how that's coming to HBO. So all signs are pointing to some better video game representations. As gamers, it's great for us, because we feel it's finally starting to get the respect that they deserve. Let's hope that continues the case. And Sony and PlayStation and HBO, they've all talked about more PlayStation series coming down the pike, which we could see a God of War, maybe more in the Uncharted. The Order 1886, I know that wasn't such a beloved game, but that's such a great world that they could go ahead and build upon. So I'm looking for more great stuff. So I'm looking for more video game adaptations that I think really could be utilized well in a movie or streaming format. What are your thoughts out there on Hunters? What's your thoughts out there on Altered Carbon or any of the video game adaptations that are being currently produced or that have been shown out there recently? We want to hear your thoughts. popculturecosmos@yahoo.com. Well, my friend, before we head on out, it's been a great episode. Just wanted to thank you so much, and also thank everyone out there for being a part of it and listening on today's program. Coming up on Friday's show, we're going to be talking about a lot of great stuff going on, including some of the movies that are coming out. Although My Spy has been moved back again to April, so we're not going to be talking about that, but there's still a lot of other great things coming down the pike, including a new season of Westworld. So we're going to be talking about that on the Friday episode, the PC Multiverse, and other awesome things going on in the world of pop culture as well. But before we head on out, my friend, I got to tell you, there's a couple good things we wanted to talk about when it concerns video games, because video games still a great part of pop culture. We're just talking about video game movie adaptations, but before we head on out, did you hear that the original prototype of the Nintendo PlayStation, that's right, before Sony made its own PlayStation, they actually were working with Nintendo to make a PlayStation together, which ultimately didn't work out. Somebody bought it at a bankruptcy auction for $75 because it was part of a scrap heap. And lo and behold, it just sold an auction for, I believe, $360,000, which is a nice chunk of change. And the previous owner had said that, you know what, I was actually offered over $1 million. So there's actually, it's very, very cool to have that. And to me, if I would have ever had a chance to have that Nintendo PlayStation, that's probably one of the two or three things I would have ever liked in my lifetime as far as the video game standpoint. And not just from a monetary sense, just the fact that Nintendo and PlayStation having that together. But you got to read the book. What's the book again that we just read, that you and I read from the
Jason Schreier book?
The Jason Schreier book. The one that's going to be adapted into a movie.
Blood, Sweat, and Pixels? Was that?
That's the one between Sega Genesis and Nintendo. Hold on.
Is it the Console Wars? Was that?
Console Wars. Yeah, Console Wars. Yes. So we, you and I read about the Nintendo PlayStation in Console Wars, and that's the upcoming movie is going. And that's going to be adapted into a movie by Seth Rogen coming up here at some point in time down the line. But it's a great book, and you get a chance to read it, and because it does have the Nintendo PlayStation in it. So I ask you, my friend, are there any games of yours from the past that you wish you wouldn't have given up? Because you never know, they might be worth a ton of money today, or is it, even if it's just sentimentality, it still means a lot to you, that has you saying to yourself, man, I wish I would have kept that video game.
Yes, but first, let me say it's kind of funny how the Nintendo PlayStation, yeah, it's a collector's item. And it is like, I love the story about how that was made and how they were, Nintendo it was Nintendo, right? No, PlayStation.
Well, Nintendo and Sony had a deal.
And then
they got undermined at E3 when Nintendo went somewhere else. Nintendo went, I think, with Philips, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and then Sega, they also had a deal with Sega. There's like prototypes for Sega and PlayStation to make something together, and that was kind of where the Saturn was born. They used they kicked Sony off the project and made the Saturn. So
and Sony didn't know about it until they basically got put out to dry on a public forum.
Yeah, they stole the patent from Sony. That's how the Saturn came above. So it is just them coming out at E3 and saying, we're going to sell our product for $200 cheaper than the Saturn. Very good marketing. But
even before that, with the Nintendo PlayStation, how that all worked out with Nintendo going into a different direction, literally on the fly in a public forum, and basically not telling Sony ahead of time, and Sony looking at that E3 just like they caught with their pants down.
Yeah, that was it's funny how it basically is a brick. It doesn't do anything. You can't play anything on it, but it's still, people want to have it so badly.
Well, it's a part of history.
It is. Yeah, it should be in a museum. It's cool. All right, so games here. So I have actually been like trying to get a lot of games back that I sold, in my youth, or to buy new games, and the whole trade-in system. No one told you that those games are going to be worth a lot of money, right? So like, I just got back Ergies, God Bless the Ring. I originally paid $30 for that game, and now it's worth like 70. I just got back Legend of Legaia. And what was the other one I got? I don't remember the other one. I'm sorry, but yeah, I'm like trying to get a lot of stuff back. So there's a list of things that there's 5 games I'm going to list here that I really want that are super expensive now. So Armed and Dangerous is not expensive. You get on eBay for $5, but I really enjoyed that game, and I strongly dislike the fact that I got rid of that. Ape Escape is another one. I remember spending hours in that game chasing the monkeys around. I don't know why I traded. I think it was when I was trying to save up money for a PlayStation 2. The third one I have is Bomberman 64: The Second Act. So that game, it was $40 on release, right? That was Nintendo 64 games cost about $40, if I remember correctly, because they were competing with PlayStation. $40 on release. Now it's like on eBay for anywhere from $200 to $600. It's crazy how expensive that is. But yeah, I remember having a lot of fun with the Bomberman series on Nintendo 64. There was one Bomberman game that came out. I don't remember what it's called, but it was not fun. It's outside the 1 and 2. Fourth one is Castlevania Bloodlines on Sega. I remember that game was about $30 when it came out, and now it's worth over $1,000. So that's one I really wish I would have kept. Fifth one is Xenogears. There were a lot of RPGs released on PlayStation, but none of them were really like great. But Xenogears was one that definitely stands out, and that game was about $40 when it came out, and now you can't find it for anywhere under 80. So a lot of these games, like they have held their worth, and now my wallet's hurting as I'm trying to get them back. So I want to show my kids these when they come around. So what about you though? What's on the old list?
Well, first of all, this conversation came about, or this idea for a topic came about when you and I got talking after we did a show. And I was telling you, when I used to work for a major West Coast electronics retailer named The Good Guys, which unfortunately was big in the 80s, bigger in the 90s, and it went in the toilet in the early 2000s, as many did. So I will say this. It was something that when it comes to video games, they had the chance to get, and they were somewhat interested in, but they really didn't put their full weight behind it, but they had some interest into it. And I remember we were talking about the fact that there were so many displays I could have gotten that they were just off the scrap heap that they threw away that I could have gotten for so cheap, as far as from a PlayStation, Saturn, in other standpoint. In fact, I did get the Saturn display at one point in time. I had it, and I bought it, I think the whole thing for $40. The Virtual Boy display was something that I should have, at the point in time, if offered, I would have, should have bought it, because we had it right there on the floor for so many months. But the one thing that we talked about that I told you was encased up for a long time, and in fact, nobody bought it, and it actually went clearance. And I don't know, somebody must have ended up buying it at some point in time, where they returned it back to corporate or something like that. Was Clay Fighter, and I believe it was a sculptor's cut. And if you have a pristine copy of Clay Fighter Sculptor's Cut, that would get you a whopping right around $10,000. That's going on eBay right now. In fact, $9,850 as we're talking right now on eBay for a complete, encased, not touched, really pristine copy of Clay Fighter Sculptor's Cut. So you're talking about something that could have, just has me now. I walk by it every single day. It went for regular price. Nobody bought it. Went down in price. Clearance. I'm just like, man, I feel so stupid now. But oh well, what can I say? But the game.
Sorry. You know what's funny about like those collector's editions, right? You buy them, and sometimes like you pay a lot of money at launch, but if you wait around long enough, a lot of stores clearance them, and you can get them for like less than $20, and they end up, a year later having a value of over 100. So it's funny how the ups and downs of that.
Well, I'm okay. I shouldn't say it's the Sculptor's Cut, but the Clay Fighter series. We did have a copy of Clay Fighter, and it's still very valuable today. I know the sculptor's cut is is worth as much as $9,850 if you could have gotten a Blockbuster. But just the fact that you could have had the chance to have that type of game is something that just when you walk by at a Blockbuster, you could have seen it sitting right there. Nobody was renting that game. Nobody was playing that game probably. So it's just something that it's kind of depressing because it's there and it was something that you could have had your hands on even 15 years ago. Something just could have been in your hands. But leading into the games that we're talking about right now, as far as from a standpoint of games that I had that I now miss, I think for me, 13 on the Xbox, which I've already talked about here, but it's also on PlayStation 2. But 13, it's in the Roman numerals XIII. It tells a great story of you having amnesia. You think you killed the president, and there's a frame job going on. So you try to solve your own mystery while you're running from other people. It's a very good cell shaded first person shooter with a multiplayer on it that was really fun to play. So yeah, it's definitely something I wish I still had in my library. And every time I go to Retro City Games, they always tell me it's sold out. And when they have a copy, it doesn't stay there very long. So it's something that if I get a chance to, I'll get it back in my library once again. N64 fans, since we talked about Clay Fighter, you got to have if you get an N64, you got to have Super Mario 64 and GoldenEye back in your lives. I had those games. I enjoyed it on my Atomic Purple N64, and I regret giving those games up, along with the console itself. I think probably because I trashed used it so much and I trashed the controller. But needless to say, the N64, great system, and Super Mario 64 and GoldenEye, absolutely loved them both. Got to play as Odd Job. That's the best way to play the multiplayer and the great story and campaign that's on it. So GoldenEye, N64, and of course all the fun you can have with Super Mario Kart 64. I should say Super Mario Kart 64 and GoldenEye N64 were probably the best games on it for me. Pitfall for the Atari 2600 is something I truly loved and enjoyed. Pitfall Harry, gotta love Pitfall Harry. I mean, that was one of the best games early on for the system. I just say it's one of the most popular games of that series. It's one of the most well thought of and fondest games. It's not obviously one of the most valuable because there's probably plenty of copies out there and they're easy to get our hands on. In fact, I've seen it many times at Retro City Games here in Las Vegas. So Pitfall for the Atari 2600 as a game that's fun to play for that system, I would probably say Pitfall would be one of the best. And for me, Indy 500 for the Commodore Amiga. I know everybody out there is saying, why would you want that game? You're just turning left, right? For 2 hours. Yes, I was turning left for 2 hours in that game, but for me, the memories were great because once I learned how to master it, it was just for me so much fun to play when you're dominating so much. And that's when it comes to early video games, whether it's any sports games, whether it's car racing, whether it's basketball, whether it's baseball, whether it's anything, once you learn how to master those type of games, you would go ahead and you would beat whatever that they could throw against you as far as any competition. And whether it was a basketball game, you learn how to play it better than anybody, or a baseball game, as far as that's concerned, you can go ahead through a season and 162-0, or that thrill of going ahead and completing through an entire race, season, or game, just in such a dominating fashion. Once I learned how to master Indy 500, I would go for 2-3 hour stretch and I would go ahead and lead and win the Indy 500 10 laps, 15 laps, 20 laps ahead of everybody else. And that to me was a blast that I haven't had in a long time. I would like that feeling again, but then I'd have to get an Amiga again, and that would be part of the problem.
It's a good list, man. Like I racing games were fun, man. Like they get a bad rap by people, but I always love a good racing game. Love the Forza series, even playing the old NASCAR games. Like there's just something endearing about them, especially when you have the ability to go backwards on the track and try to crash into everybody. They were just good old fashioned fun.
And now they're all simulators, and a lot of them are realistic looking, and those are great. Or the arcade sims that they have out there now, and obviously the graphics on them, on graphic games, on racing games for the most part, are better than on anything else, because these systems really know how to maximize the detail that goes into making these racing games. But even if you're a big fan of iRacing that's out there, as far as the sim is concerned, I mean, that's probably one of the best sims that are out there, especially if you're into really spending the money into it and getting into it and getting into the streaming fashion. That I think the racing games are really cool. But for me, it all started with Indy 500, not for the Atari 2600, because that one I really didn't like, but for the Amiga, the Commodore Amiga. That's probably one of my best memories that I have of that system. I mean, I know it did a lot more than that, but for me, playing Indy 500 was probably one of the best things I could have done on a Commodore Amiga. What are your thoughts out there? What are the memories that you have on games that you wish you still had in your life? Share us your thoughts and your list of the games that you really would have liked to have kept and held on to. popculturecosmos@yahoo.com. Also as well, Pop Culture Cosmos, Humanity Media, and Game Source on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as well. Well, it's been a great episode, my friend. I cannot thank you enough for being a part of it. Any last thoughts on the way out?
I'm currently trying to get through Castlevania, so I'll have some thoughts on that soon. But I am stoked to hear that there is a Devil May Cry game coming, or not game, but show coming out by Adi Shankar, the guy that makes Castlevania, and it's also going to be in the same universe. So that's really exciting.
That's really exciting to hear. I mean, again, it's a more of an affirmation of the video game context as in its entirety, that more and more of these streaming outlets, these movie companies, they're willing to take a chance on these video game properties, because they're finally starting to see what it's the value of video games and the narratives they can tell. So for Josh Peterson, this is Gerald Glassford. It's another beautiful day in paradise right here in the Pop Culture Cosmos. We thank you for listening. And here's hoping you have yourself a great